After all the work I did at IFA, you know I had to spend some time in Europe. But, as we all know, the Android news train does not stop. So, neither do I. So, grab yourself a British pint or some strong French coffee, because it's Josh Vergara from Android Authority. What's going on, everybody? And it's time for another dose of the week's top Android news. It's Android Authority Weekly. Did you get as excited as we did seeing that picture of what looked like a new NEXUS device? Well, the smoke of confusion might be clearing as we get more details on what could be the upcoming NEXUS smartphone. EV Leaks hinted on Twitter that claims an FCC filing thought to be the much anticipated device might have been premature. Turns out those weren't patents for a CDMA version of the LG G2, but instead evidence pointing to filings for a different smartphone. Pictures of the supposed device then appeared as well, and clearly this isn't an LG G2 we're looking at. This is certainly more news on the fabled new NEXUS smartphone than we've ever had. To tide you over, Reddit user Vavicon created a pretty badass render that considers the lack of a phone speaker as a sign that the new phone might use bone induction technology instead. And as I'm sure you've heard all over the interwebs this week, Apple announced their new iPhone entries into their smartphone line. Not only did they announce the iPhone 5S, which now comes with a fingerprint scanner, they also announced the iPhone 5C, a plastic encased version of their flagship smartphone. This $99 on-contract version of the iPhone looks to engage the mid-range. Of course, the $199 on-contract 5S brings further updates to the flagship. As we're always wanting to keep our pulse on the competition, we take our own look at the new iPhones to see how they stack up with their new updates. We also ponder the implications of the new iPhones, mainly in regards to the 64-bit chip it introduces. Check out all of those articles on AndroidAuthority.com. Speaking of 64-bit processors, it seems that Apple was ahead of a trend that is actually already bound to happen. And along with it, we might be seeing even more powerful memory inside of our smartphones in the near future. With ARM essentially leading the charge, we could be seeing upwards of 50% increases in performance compared to current chipsets. As Samsung boss J.K. Shin confirmed, 64-bit processors are in Samsung's future, and we are reminded that this is a leap in processor tech that isn't some sudden occurrence, but rather an endeavor in the works for at least the last few years. Another interesting tidbit regards RAM. Samsung introduced 3 GB of RAM in its Galaxy Note 3, but it unsurprisingly won't end there. Apparently, we could be getting up to 4 GB in our phones within the next year, effectively making smartphone computing about as powerful as regular computing. It's an interesting prospect indeed. And do you remember the saga of Hugo Barra, the now former Googler who gave us a lot of really good presentations of new products in the past year? Well, in an interview with Kara Swisher of All Things D, Barra stated that he already knew Ben Lin, founder of Xiaomi and himself a former Googler, and was interested in the upcoming company for some time. With the release of their Mi2, Xiaomi reached out to Barra for advice on international expansion, and talks eventually moved to them teaming up. In the interest of transparency, Barra involved Google execs early on, and about a year later, we find ourselves at this juncture. With Xiaomi and Google's positive vibes, perhaps Mountain View was okay losing Barra to a friend. Now we will just have to see what Barra can do for the up-and-coming Chinese manufacturer.
There's your view. Okay, we don't need to be at the top. This is fine.
Okay, let's get back to some device news with some announcements that were made at IDF in San Francisco. Not to be left behind all of the Haswell-powered notebooks that have been coming out, Intel has announced a bunch of new Chromebooks. Offerings from Toshiba, Acer with its own Chrome box, and HP were hinted at, though a lack of talk regarding pricing suggests that they might be more premium devices than ones hitting the original Chromebook low price point. We will learn more about what these updated Chrome devices offer, but with the new processors, we can expect them to have much better battery life without sacrificing performance. And finally, we end on HTC, whose larger version of their flagship device should be coming out pretty soon. With a bunch of other companies coming out with their own huge versions of their flagship devices, HTC hopes that the One Max will be taking the One line to another level. EV Leaks was the first to put word out that the One Max is on its way and could be headed to Sprint. The rumor mill kept going as 2 shots of the new device leaked. at least showing us how much bigger the One Max will be from its originator. With 5.9 inches in its display, it will come with the Snapdragon 800 and HTC's additions like the Ultra Pixels and Blink Feed. But if you look closely, the One Max has a small area on its back that looks like a fingerprint reader. Looks like it's going to be a returning trend. And so, there you have it, for this edition of Android Authority Weekly. As always, you can find the written articles in the description below. Don't forget to drop us a like and to subscribe to our channel. And stay tuned to AndroidAuthority.com because we're your source for all things Android.